العلم أشراف مطلوب وطالبه لله أكرام من يمشي على قدم. العلم نور مبين يستضيء به أهل السعادات والجهال في الظلم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد. So we resume Bab Sujood al-Sahwi from the book Zaad Mustaqni. The last lesson we started on the chapter at the beginning, and we said that Sujood al-Sahwi is legislated for one of three reasons, and one of them being a ziyada, when a person increases something in the salah, and the next being a naqs, when someone leaves something out in the salah, and when someone has a shak. So these are asbab sujood al-sahwi. These are the reasons why a person needs to perform sujood al-sahwi. Then the Shaykh rahimahullah talked about, the author talked about when sujood al-sahwi is legislated, and the fact that if a person leaves anything out, if a person leaves something out intentionally, then sujood al-sahwi is not legislated for that person. Because the whole point of sujood al-sahwi is the sujood that is done for sahwi, that is done for forgetting. Like if a person does it intentionally, then in reality they haven't forgotten. So now today we're going to start from leaving off some of the wajibat or arkan. You should all know where we stopped. وَمَنْ تَرَكَ رُكْنًا فَذَكَرَهُ. That is where we stopped. So in the last lesson we talked about a person who increases in something. The increasing of a mas'ala, the increasing of action, the increasing of a recitation, a reading, a takbir, or whatever it may be. We've already studied that. Today we're going to start on the second part, which is if a person leaves something out. And then inshallah when we finish this chapter we're going to move on to Bab Salat al-Tatawwu', or the chapter of voluntary prayers. The Shaykh says رحمه الله ومن ترك ركنا فذكره بعد شروعه في قراءة ركعة أخرى بطلت التي تركه منها وقبله يعود وجوبا فيأتي به وبما بعده وإن علم بعد السلام فكترك ركعة كاملة. طيب. So this is the first mas'ala that the Shaykh rahimahullah is going to start on. Now when we talk about a naqs, something deficient, means, or in the salah, it's one of three things. Either a person leaves out, either you leave out a rukun, or you leave out a wajib, so the rukun being a pillar. So either you forget to perform a wajib, or you forget to perform a rukun, or thirdly you forget to perform a sunnah, something from the sunnah. So the Shaykh obviously is going to start with if you leave off something that is a pillar in the salah, and he's going to split it into different scenarios. وَمَنْ تَرَكَ رُكْنًا فَذَكَرَهُ بَعْدَ شُرُوعِهِ. We're not going to mention if a person leaves something out intentionally. Why? Because the qa'idah is if you leave something out intentionally, then your salah is invalid anyway. So he says, وَمَنْ تَرَكَ رُكْنًا, whoever leaves off a rukn, فَذَكَرَهُ, put number one on there, like alif or number one. فَذَكَرَهُ بَعْدَ شُرُوعِهِ في قراءة ركعة أخرى. Lakin he remembers this, طيب, he remembers this rukn after starting the recitation in the following pillar, in the following rak'ah. What does the Shaykh say? بطلت التي تركه منها. Let's understand this first. وَمَنْ تَرَكَ, whomsoever leaves off a pillar. Who's going to give me an example? Fatiha. So you've said Allahu Akbar, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Qul huwa Allahu Ahad, Allahu Samad. What have you left off? Fatiha. So far we've got the Surah Al-Mas'ala. وَمَنْ تَرَكَ رُكْنًا. So he's left the Fatiha because it is a rukn. فَذَكَرَهُ, lakin he remembers بعد شروعه في قراءة ركعة أخرى. أو ركعة أخرى. So he's forgotten to read the Fatiha, and he remembers that he forgot to read the Fatiha in the second rak'ah. So he says Allahu Akbar, Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad, and then finishes. He says Allahu Akbar, goes down for ruku', Sami Allahu liman hamida, does his 2 sujood as normal, and he stands up, and then he says A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And then he remembers, فَذَكَرَهُ بَعْدَ شُرُوعِهِ. He remembers after what? After starting the recitation. What does the Shaykh say? بطلت. In that case, بطلت الركعة السابقة. The last rak'ah in which you forgot to read the Fatiha is invalid now. Is invalid. طيب. Pay attention to where it says في قراءة, underline that. As we move on, inshallah, you'll notice why I told you to underline it. Like, we need to understand the matan first. بعد شروعه في قراءة ركعة أخرى بطلت, that rak'ah is invalid. طيب. What does he do now? That first rak'ah is completely invalid. So this rak'ah is in reality his what? His first rak'ah. Is that understood? طيب. وقبله يعود وجوبا. قبله قبل ماذا؟ ها؟ قبل فعل قراءتي، قبل فعل القراءة، قبل الشروع في القراءة. So where it says وقبله that ضمير وقبله أي قبل الشروع في القراءة، أي قبل الشروع في القراءة. So he remembers before starting the recitation. Right? The Shaykh says رحمه الله يعود وجوبا. It is wajib for him to return back. فيأتي به, and then he recites that Fatiha. He recites the pillar that he left out. وما بعده, and anything that is left that was after it, anything that was taking place after that Fatiha. So an example, pay attention. The first individual, he said Allahu Akbar, قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد, صح? He went down for ruku', sujood, came back up, and then he started to say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. From this point onwards, or even after reading the Fatiha, or even after reading Qul huwallahu ahad in that second rak'ah, he remembers what? That he did not read the Fatiha. What happens? What does the Shaykh say, rahimahullah? That first rak'ah is invalid. And this rak'ah that he's praying now takes the place of that what? Of that first rak'ah. That is the first scenario. Then where it says وَقَبْلَهُ, put number 2. Circle around number 2. وَقَبْلَهُ, قبل ماذا? Before starting the recitation. So Surah Al-Mas'ala, pay attention. The same scenario. Allahu Akbar. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدُ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ. He goes down for ruku', and then he remembers, I'm now in ruku'. What does he do? Go back. Why? Because he remembered qablahu, he remembered before it. Okay. What about if he's now in sujood? Subhana rabbiyal a'la, subhana rabbiyal a'la. And he remembers, what does he do? He goes back up. Like, he goes to sujood, he gets back up, and then he stands up. And he says, Allahu Akbar. Without reading the Fatiha yet, and he remembers. What does he do? He goes back. Who says he goes back? Lahta. Who? If you say he goes back, put your hand up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you say he doesn't go back, put your hand up. You put your hand up both times. La. I don't want to say. La. Just pay attention to the scenario that I'm giving. He what? He doesn't go. He goes back. He goes back. Limada? Has he started the recitation? No, he hasn't started the recitation. Is that understood? I'm elaborating on this point because there's going to be a difference, and we're not going to go with this opinion of the mu'allif. Lakin, pay attention. If he remembers before the recitation, he goes back. Even if he's standing. but he hasn't recited, according to the mu'allif, the author, حفظه الله, he goes back. طيب. وقبله يعني وجوبا يعود وجوبا فيأتي به, he comes with what? به goes back to what? Wherever the pillar was that he left out, he goes back to that pillar that was left out. طيب. ويأتي وبما بعده, and everything that came after it. What does he mean by this? He does everything properly. Remember when we said Allahu Akbar and he read قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. طيب. He hasn't obviously read the Fatiha, صح? He went down for ruku' and he got back up and he went down for sujood and he done his 2 sujood. All of that is something that he done incorrectly after missing out the pillar, صح? Therefore, naturally speaking, he'll have to do that again because that is not counted. That is what he means by فَيَأْتِي بِهِ وَبِمَا بَعْدَهُ. Is that واضح? طيب. Then the Shaykh says رحمه الله وَإِذَا عَلِمَ بعد السلام, وإذا علم, and if he finds out and he remembers, بعد السلام, after saying السلام عليكم ورحمة الله, السلام عليكم ورحمة الله, he remembers, فكترك ركعة كاملة, فكترك ركعة كاملة. Pay attention. وإذا علم, if he remembers, بعد السلام, after saying السلام عليكم ورحمة الله, السلام عليكم ورحمة الله, he remembers that in the first rak'ah or in the second rak'ah or in any of the rak'ahs he left out a pillar, whether it's reading the Fatiha or ruku', wherever it might be. But he remembers after saying السلام عليكم ورحمة الله, السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Maybe he remembered, maybe someone else told him. Like he remembers. He says فَكَتَرْكِ رَكْعَةٍ كَامِلَةٍ. It is as if he has left a complete rak'ah out. Surah al-Mas'ala. مثلا, let's say in the first rak'ah, I said, Allahu Akbar, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدَ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ Allahu Akbar, سَمِعَ اللَّهُ لِمَنْ حَمِدَهُ. And I carried on praying. And then I finished the salah. All 4 rak'ahs of Isha, مثلا. Then I said, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I remember, or someone tells me, in the first rak'ah, you didn't read the Fatiha loud. You didn't even read the Fatiha. That is the Surah al-Mas'ala. So I remember after. What do? He says, فَكَتَرْكِ رَكْعَةٍ كَامِلَةٍ. Then it is as if you've left the whole rak'ah out. It is as if you've left a whole rak'ah out. طيب. What is the hal? What is the solution? You stand up, you pay 1 rak'ah. So where it says فَكَتَرْكِ رَكْعَةٍ, you write فَتُعِيدُ ركعة كاملة. فتعيد, you repeat, ركعة كاملة, you repeat a whole rak'ah. إذا لم يطل الفصل, إذا لم يطل الفصل. What did you have? What have you written? He repeats the whole rak'ah, صح? لكن إذا لم يطل الفصل. لكن if there's not a long gap between that. So for example, let's say now I prayed Fatiha and I left the first rak'ah of Isha. Someone reminds me an hour later that I've done 101 things in that time. I've left the masjid, I've gone home, I've driven, gone on the motor, whatever it might be. 1 hour is quite a long time. Half an hour, 40 minutes is quite a long time. So what do? You repeat the whole salah. You repeat the whole salah. There. Why does he need to repeat the whole rak'ah? Because he left out a pillar. And a pillar, sujood al-sahwi, is not what? Sufficient. Sujood al-sahwi doesn't cover it. Sujood al-sahwi does not cover it. Like, how, that first scenario, how many different situations? 2. What are they? La, 3. 3. They are 3. Like, what is the first one? He left a rukun. And he remembers when? before he remembers after starting the next rak'ah, the recitation of the next rak'ah. What does he do in this scenario? The first one is cancelled, and he continues as if this is the first one. The second scenario, he remembers before starting the recitation. He goes back. Like the third scenario,
He finishes the Salah.
Ba'da taslim, after finishing the Salah. How does he make up for this? He repeats one rak'ah. مثلا, I said Allahu Akbar, I left out the Fatiha, صح? طيب, I go down for ruku', sujood, and so on. Then I stand up. I now want to pray my second rak'ah. But I remember after I started, like before I started the Fatiha, I remember that I have not what? I haven't recited the Fatiha in the last one. What do I do now? La. I go back down. I go back to the first, as if it is my first rak'ah. وَقَبْلَهُ يَعُودُ وُجُوبًا. I go back. I haven't recited the recitation yet.
But how would he go back if he's already standing?
صح. Has he started the recitation? La. So he goes back. Pay attention to this. As we get to, when we finish the wajibat, you will understand why I explain this in this way. The qira'ah makes a difference to the Hanabila. The second qawl is as long as you're standing, no. You've gone on to the next pillar in that same situation, therefore the first one is nullified. Therefore, pay attention. Ala kullin, what you're onto is correct for you to ask question about this specific situation because it's different to what we've studied in the past. Pay attention for now. As it is, how many scenarios for leaving out a pillar? 3. Keep it at that for now. طيب. طيب. وإن نسي, now he's going to the wajibat. Now he's going to go into leaving off a wajib. He says وإن نسي, and if he forgets التشهد الأول, and if he forgets the first tashahhud, the middle one, ونهض, and he gets up, لزمه الرجوع ما لم ينتصب قائما. ما لم ينتصب قائما. Right, number 1 on top of ما لم ينتصب قائما. So he says, if he forgets the first tashahhud, meaning the middle tashahhud, he's praying Salat al-Isha and he leaves out the middle tashahhud. وَنَهَضَ, and he starts to stand up. And then he remembers, مثلا, لَزِمَهُ الرُّجُوعُ, it is wajib for him to go back. For as long as he hasn't straightened up. As long as he's not fully what? Standing up. So مثلا, you've got up and you put your hands on the floor and you're ready to go up. But you remember, what do you have to do? You sit down and you do the tashahhud. Is that understood, the first scenario? فَإِنِ اسْتَتَمَّ, if he completes his rak'ah, if he completes the standing, مثلا he says Allahu Akbar, and he is fully standing. قائما, and he is fully standing, كُرِهَ رُجُوعُهُ, it is disliked for him to return back. So فَإِنِ اسْتَتَمَّ, put number 2 on top of there. كُرِهَ رُجُوعُهُ, it is disliked for him to go back. Surah al-Mas'ala, an example, pay attention. I've left out the middle tashahhud, صح? Allahu Akbar. I've started to stand up. I am now fully standing. Fully standing. فَإِنِ اسْتَتَمَّ قَائِمًا, if he's completely standing, the Shaykh says what? كُرِهَ رُجُوعُهُ, it is disliked for me to now go back. Note, he does not say يَحْرُمُ. He says what? كُرِهَ, it is disliked. Meaning I can go back, but it is better for me to what? Stay. كُرِهَ رُجُوعُهُ. وَإِن لَمْ يَنْتَصِبْ, like if he isn't fully standing, لَزِمَهُ رُجُوعُهُ, it is wajib for him to go back. How many scenarios have we studied so far? 2. One saying what? Halfway up, what does he do? Sit back down. The other one says what? If he's standing. If he is what? Standing. For him, what should he do? It is disliked for him to return back to the middle tashahhud that he has left out. طيب. Then the Shaykh says rahimahullah, وَإِن شَرَعَ فِي الْقِرَاءَةِ وَإِن شَرَعَ, if he starts to read the Fatiha, the Qira'ah, حَرُمَ الرُّجُوعُ عَلَيْهِ, it is haram for him to return back. وَعَلَيْهِ السُّجُودُ, and what is upon him is sujood لِكُلٍّ, and what is upon him is to do sujood sahwi. For him, missing out that middle tashahhud. Is that understood? Right. How many scenarios in this second one? 3 scenarios. How many scenarios in the previous one? 3 scenarios. Right. With regards to the last scenario, from the middle scenario, if he stands up, if he's fully standing, the Shaykh says كُرِهَ رُجُوعُهُ. Why have the Hanabila? I'm going to mention 2 things. I'm going to mention the ta'leel, the reason, and the evidence that goes against it. Why have they connected going back to the qira'ah? As you can see, in this one, leaving out the wajib and leaving out the pillar, where have they connected the wajib to? At what point can you not go back? Al-qira'ah. Whereas if you're standing, even for the second rak'ah, what you believe to be your second rak'ah, according to them, you can go back, sah? طيب. No, they believe that both are pillars. Yani your standing is a pillar and your qira'ah is a pillar. But the wajh tafriq, where they make a difference between the two, is they say the qiyam is not maqsood. Yani it is not on maqsood, a rukun that is maqsood in of itself. You're only standing to be able to read the qira'ah. Whereas qira'ah, it is a rukun that is maqsood. It is a rukun that is maqsood. Is that understood? Like, who can repeat that? Why have they differentiated between the qira'ah and the rukun? By the way, later on, someone remind me, I don't want to spend time reading it out to you now, so you can write it in Arabic. Someone remind me to mention it to you later on, text it to you later on. Why have they differentiated? Ahsant. Is the rukun and objective. They're both a pillar, but the standing is there to serve the recitation. It is a maqsood. Yani the qira'ah is maqsooda. It is what is intended. The standing is only a means to that. Yes, it is a pillar, but it is there to serve the recitation. And if you haven't started the recitation, then in reality, what? Then you haven't started the rak'ah and the qira'ah. Right. There's a qawl al-thani, and that is the stronger opinion. The second opinion is what? أنه نعم. قول الثاني قول يعني قاف 1 قاف 2 قول الثاني قاف 2 والقول الثاني في المسألة أنه يحرم عليه الرجوع ما دام أنه استتم قائما لحديث المغيرة رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إذا قام الإمام في الركعتين فإن ذكر قبل أن يستوي قائما فإن ذكر قبل أن يستوي قائما فليجلس فإن استوى قائما فلا يجلس فإن استوى قائما فلا يجلس ويسجد سجدتي السهو ويسجد سجدتي السهو. طيب. So what I've read out was the ta'leel that you wrote, or the qawl thani. The second opinion is what? That it is haram for him to return back as long as he has stood up. Now that he is standing, it is haram for him to stand up, to go back. And the evidence is the hadith of Mughira radiallahu anhu, where he said that the Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا قَامَ الْإِمَامُ فِي رَكْعَتَيْنِ. If the imam stands up after 2 rak'at, meaning he leaves out the what? Middle tashahhud. فَإِنْ ذَكَرَ, if he remembers قَبْلَ أَنْ يَسْتَوِيَ, if he remembers before fully standing, and يَسْتَوِيَ, that his body is equal, قَائِمًا, before standing, if he remembers before standing properly, فَلْيَجْلِسْ, let him sit down. Now, فَإِنْ اسْتَوَى, however, if he is now, فَإِنْ اسْتَوَى قَائِمًا, like if he ends up standing fully, فَلَا يَجْلِسْ, فَلَا يَجْلِسْ, let him not sit down, let him not sit down, وَيَسْجُدُ, لكن let him pray sujood السهوي at the end. Let him pray sujood السهوي. طيب. So in this hadith you will find how many scenarios? 2 scenarios. Whether you've stood up completely, whether you're standing completely, or whether you haven't stood up completely. If you haven't stood up completely, the Prophet ﷺ said what? So go back, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if you have stood up, فَإِنِ اسْتَوَى قَائِمًا, if you're now fully standing, then the Prophet ﷺ said you cannot what? You cannot go back. Then you cannot go back. So based on that, how many scenarios are we going to get in this? The one we previously left out a rukn, and now we're leaving out a rukn, a pillar, a wajib. 2 scenarios. So based on what we've just studied now, if we go back, go back to the beginning of where I was reading, وَمَنْ تَرَكَ رُكْنًا. If you leave out وَمَنْ تَرَكَ رُكْنًا, if whoever leaves out a rukn, فَذَكَرَهُ بَعْدَ شُرُوعِهِ, we're not going to accept that. We're not going to go along with that. And the other opinion is the stronger opinion we're saying. فذكره بعد شروعه في قراءة ركعة أخرى بطلت التي تركها منها وقبله يعود وجوبا. This is where we disagree. وقبله يعود رجوعا. وقبله, if he remembers before the recitation, he what? Goes back. That is what we don't agree with. In summary, if you leave out a pillar, let's say Allahu Akbar, you've left out, and you say Qul Huwallahu Ahad, what have you left out? The Fatiha. If you remember before getting into the same position as that rukun, then you go back. For example, now I say Alhamdulillah, I leave the Fatiha out. I go down for ruku', and then I remember I haven't read the Fatiha. What do? Go back. I go back, I read the... I go back, the second example, I've left the Fatiha out. I go down for ruku', Sami Allahu liman hamida, I go down for sujood, Subhana Rabbiyal A'la, and then I remember, hold on, I forgot to read the Fatiha. What do? Go back. طيب. I go back, let's say for example, I remember in the second tashahhud, the second sujood. What do? Go back and read the Fatiha. Is that understood? What about if I remember, if it's the second rak'ah going into the third and I remember while I'm in tashahhud and I haven't read the Fatiha of the second rak'ah? I'm in the Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. The first rak'ah I've completed it, fine. So I got up for the second rak'ah, and in the second rak'ah I forget to read the Fatiha. Pay attention. The second rak'ah I forget to read the Fatiha. I forget to read the Fatiha. I go down for ruku', I go down for sujood, and then before going up to the third rak'ah, what do we normally do? Tashahhud. But then I remember in the second rak'ah I did not read the Fatiha. What do? You stand back up. Ahsantum. You stand back up. طيب. So we're getting closer and closer to the next rak'ah. Hopefully you've noticed. طيب. The example. First rak'ah. Allahu Akbar. Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad. What have I left out? Fatiha. I go down for ruku'. Sami Allahu liman hamida. All this time I haven't remembered. I go down for sujood. I sit back up. I go down for the second sujood. I sit back up. And then I stand up. Now I'm fully standing. And I'm fully standing. And then I remember I did not read the Fatiha in the last rak'ah. What do?
You just start from where you are. If you don't recite the Fatiha, you just start from where you are.
طيب.
Yeah.
Who agrees?
The first one.
لا forget about qawl. The qawl rajih now. Carry on. I don't need to go back. Why do I not need to go back? You stood up. What is the evidence? Hadith Mughira. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, فَإِنِ اسْتَوَى قَائِمًا, if he stands up fully, فَلَا يَجْلِسْ, let him not go back down. Right. Now I'm not in that same rak'ah. In this scenario, I've reached the same rak'ah of what? The same position that I left the pillar out. The same position I left the pillar out. Right. You leave out a pillar, you go back to do it. You leave out a wajib, if you've gone into the next pillar. So that was with regards to the wajib, the pillar. Now let's go back to the wajib. When I left the tashahhud out, if I'm standing, I'm getting up to stand, and I remember that I haven't read the tashahhud, what do? Go back down and do the tashahhud. طيب. If I remember while I'm halfway up, what do? Go back down. If I remember after fully standing up, what do? Continue. Because now you're in the next pillar. So if you're in the next pillar, you don't go back for a wajib. Tashahhud is what? Wajib. You don't go back for a wajib if you've left out what? If you reach the pillar. So based on this second scenario, where in nasiya tashahhud al-awwal, if you leave out the middle tashahhud, how many different scenarios are there? Two, on the second opinion. Two, which is what?
Fully standing.
If you're sitting, you forget the middle tashahhud. Before you get to stand up, or you're trying to stand up, you remember halfway up, or you remember before you're fully standing, what do? Sit back down. Like if you remember when you're fully standing, do you go back down? No, you do not go back down based on the hadith of Mughira. Right. Then the Shaykh says, وَمَنْ شَكَّ. So far we've studied when you leave out a pillar and when you leave out a what? A wajib. Who can give me an example of leaving out a pillar? Now, give me the examples later. Someone give me an example, write down and then remind me, an example of leaving out a pillar. I want someone to tell me, like at the end, inshallah. And questions at the end, inshallah. Because I want to finish this chapter and the next one. Or get through to the next one. Then the Shaykh says, Rahimahullah, وَمَنْ شَكَّ فِي عَدَدِ رَكَعَاتِ أَخَذَ بِالْأَقَلِّ. Whoever has a shak on the adad of the rak'at, he has to go back, he has to take the smallest number. طيب, الشك is what? التردد بين أمرين أيهما الذي وقع. التردد بين أمرين. You're not sure of which of the two things that you've done. So you have a shak. Have you prayed 3 rak'at or 4 rak'at? Have you prayed 2 rak'at or 3 rak'at? That is a shak. And you don't know which one is what? more. Or you don't know which one that you're inclining towards. وَمَنْ شَكَّ, whoever has a doubt, في عدد ركعات, and in the number of rak'at that he has done, then let him what? Go back and build it upon the smallest number. أخذ بالأقل. مثلا, you're not sure whether you've prayed 4 rak'at or 3 rak'at. Which one do you build it on? 3. You're not sure if you prayed 2 rak'at or 1 rak'at. Which one do you build it on? 1. Why? Because you're certain that you've prayed 1. You're not sure whether you've prayed the second one. And the qa'idah says, al-yaqinu la yazulu bi-shak. You apply that which you're certain of. Also the hadith by Abu Sa'id radiallahu anhu, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, إِذَا شَكَّ أَحَدُكُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِ. If one of you has a doubt in his salah, فَلَمْ يَدْرِ كَمْ صَلَّى ثَلَاثًا أَمْ أَرْبَعًا, and he does not know what he has prayed, 3 or 4, فَلْيَطْرِحِ الشَّكْ. Let him throw away the shak. وَلْيَبْنِ عَلَى مَسْتَيْقًا. Let him build upon what he is sure of. And what are you sure of? The smaller number. You're sure of the smaller number. And this is used also for tawaf. Let's say you're doing tawaf and you forget whether you're on the 5th shoulder, or the 5th tawaf, or the 6th tawaf. Which one do you build it on? The 5th one. Why? Because that is what you're sure of. طيب. ثم يسجد سجدتين قبل أن يسلم. Then he prays sujood السهوي. طيب. Then the Shaykh says rahimahullah, however the ulama they say that with shak, there's 3 scenarios that shak is not taken into consideration. Number 1, if it is always there, يعني a person does every ibadah and he always has shak. Did I make wudu or not after he finishes wudu? Did I pray or not after he finishes salah? That scenario, the ulama they say don't give it any attention. The second is, if a person is just wahm, he's just it comes out of nowhere. I wonder, did I pray 3 or 4 in this last rak'ah? Did I make wudu or not? So there's no truth to it, there's no reality to it. Like it's just a shak, a doubt that comes to him. That is obviously from shaitan. Again, that one he doesn't pay attention to. And another one is, the third one is when it's after the ibadah. And this is something that obviously keeps coming back. He has a shak after the ibadah and he's not sure of anything. Like if he's sure after the ibadah that he's prayed 3 instead of 4, what does he do? If he's sure he's prayed 3, what does he do? Go back and pray the other one. Like they say that if a person is not sure that they've made or they prayed 3 instead of 4, then they don't go back. طيب. Then the Shaykh says rahimahullah, وَإِنْ شَكَّ فِي تَرْكِ رُكْنٍ فَتَرْكَ تَرْكِهِ. So pay attention, with regards to the shak, he's going to mention 3 scenarios. The first you've already studied. وَمَنْ شَكَّ فِي عَدَدِ رَكْعَاتٍ. If a person has a doubt on the adad of the rak'at, put 1. عدد rak'at. If you have a doubt about the number of rak'at, what do? What's the cure? بِالْأَقَلْ. Build it upon the smaller number. وَإِنْ شَكَّ, put number 2. وَإِنْ شَكَّ فِي تَرْكِ رُكْنٍ. If he has a doubt that he has left out a pillar. If he has a doubt that he has left out a pillar. He says what? في ترك ركن فكتركه أي حكمه كتركه. It is as if he has left it out. It is as if he has what? Left it out. طيب. Now I have a shak. Did I do the ruku' in the last rak'ah or did I not do it? And it is a valid shak. It's not something that is always a repetition. It always comes about. Lakin, I have a shak whether I prayed the last ruku' or I have not prayed the last ruku' in the last rak'ah. What do I do? He says, فَكَتَرْكِهِ. It is as if you have left it out. Why? Write the ta'leel. لأن الأصل عدم وجود ركن. لأن الأصل عدم وجود الركن مع الشك فيكون كتركه كتركه. So the reason for this is لأن الأصل, because the asl is عدم وجود الركن. The asl is that you haven't prayed it. Now مثلا أصل now صلاة العشاء, the asl is we haven't what? Prayed it. Although the salah at the time of Isha has come in, صح? But the asl is that we haven't prayed it, صح? So later on, if we have a doubt whether we prayed the salah or not, and that is a valid doubt, what do? Pray. Why? Because the asl is that you haven't prayed. That is what you're sure of. So it says لأن الأصل, because the asl is عدم وجود الركن, is the fact that you haven't done that pillar. That is what the asl is. مع الشك, especially when there is shak. Therefore it is as if you have left it out. So in reality it is the same as building upon the smaller number. Last one we said if you're not sure whether you prayed 3 rak'at or 4 rak'at, you build upon the what? The smaller number, which is what you're sure of. If you have a doubt whether you've done the rukun or not, what are you sure of? That you haven't done it. You're just not sure whether you've done it or not. Therefore you're again building upon what you are sure of. Then he says وَلَا يَسْجُدُ لِشَكِّهِ. Put the third mas'ala, Meme 3, or the third mas'ala. وَلَا يَسْجُدُ لِشَكِّهِ في ترك واجب. لكن ولا يسجد, he does not perform sujood sahwi لشكه, if he has a doubt في ترك واجب, if he has a doubt in leaving out something that is a wajib, أو زيادة, or he has a doubt whether he has increased something or not, he does not pray sujood sahwi, he says. Pay attention here. Who can repeat this for me? What is the author trying to tell us now? Oh, hold on, Afan. What did he tell us before? وَإِن شَكَ فِي تَرْكِ رُكْنٍ. If he has a doubt whether he's left out a pillar or not, what did he say we should do?
If he's a doubt in the number of rak'at.
La, pillar, with the pillar la. With the pillar one. If we have a doubt whether we've done a pillar or not, what do?
You return to that, the pillar that
we return to it and we do it. We perform it again. Why? Because the asl is that you haven't done it. Sah. Here he's about to tell us something different, which is what?
Don't perform sujood sahwi whether you have a shak in naqs or if you have a shak in ziyada of a wajib.
If you have a doubt in leaving off a wajib, or you have a doubt in increasing something, whether you prayed 4 rak'at or 5 rak'at, you have a doubt. He says what? You do not pray sujood sahwi. Is that understood? Lakin why? No. Why do we do sujood sahwi? To make up for a shortcoming. You have a doubt in a wajib, whether you've done it or not. Or you have a doubt in a ziyada, or whether you've increased or not. So the reason you do sujood sahwi is because you have a doubt in these, whether you've done it or not. Here you have a doubt about the reason of performing sujood sahwi. You have a shak about the reason of performing sujood sahwi. Therefore, because you have a doubt on the reason of performing sujood sahwi, you don't have to even do sujood sahwi because the asal or the sabab is not there. So write the ta'liq at the end, right? لأنه شك, at the end of ziyada, right? لأنه شك في سبب وجود السجود السهوي في سبب وجود سجود السهوي فلم يجب السجود. So the reason why the author said this, rahimahullah, why the Hanabila say this, is because he has a doubt, he has a doubt في سبب وجود سجود السهوي. He has a doubt on the reason of sujood al-sahwi even being there. Remember at the beginning of the chapter we said The reasons why you do sujood sahwi are what? You increase something, you decrease something, or you have a doubt. So once you have this doubt of increasing, decreasing, or doubt in of itself of how many rak'at, that is when you now need to do something about it. So, here he is saying the actual doubt is not even there. The reason for sujood sahwi is not even being met. Why? Because وَلَا يَسْجُدُ لِلشَّكِّ, you've had a doubt about the reason why you would even perform sujood sahwi. على أي حال, that is what the author is saying. The second opinion is that يجب سجود السهو. The second opinion is يجب يلزمه سجود السهو. يلزمه سجود السهو لأنه شك, because he has a doubt. So the second opinion is that he has to perform sujood sahwi because he has a doubt whether he has left out a wajib or not. Whether he has left out a wajib or not. And the asl, if you have a doubt about something, the asl is what? That you haven't done it. That you have not done it. So what has the Shaykh done, rahimahullah? He separated between two masail. If you go back to the last masala, forget this masala, it's a bit confusing. Go back to the last masala, what did he tell us? If you leave out a pillar, or if you have a doubt whether you've left out a pillar or not, what should you do? You go on as if you haven't done it, because the asl is what? That you haven't done it. He's not saying that now for the wajib and for the ziyada. So there's two asls that have gone against one another. Inshallah, when you revise it, you'll understand it. Then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, وَلَا سُجُودَ عَلَى الْمَأْمُومِ أو ولا سجود على مأموم إلا تبعا لإمامه. طيب. Put meme, another مسألة. ولا سجود. There is no sujood على مأموم, on the ma'mum, which is the one that is being led, meaning the one praying behind the imam. إلا تبعا لإمامه, unless he is following his imam. Surah al-Mas'ala. Let's say now we're praying behind the imam, and I forget to say Subhana Rabbiyal A'la. I'm praying behind the imam and I forget to say Subhana Rabbiyal A'la. What is the author saying that I should do? Nothing. Limada? Because the imam covers the what? The mistake. The imam covers the mistake. طيب. So the ulama, they divide this into two. But if you go back to the Risala of Ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah that we studied last time, then it will give you further explanation. But like the person that is praying behind the imam, he's one of two. Either he started the salah with the imam, or he joined the imam. Is it understood? Right. So there's different scenarios on both. Because the Shaykh hasn't mentioned it, we're going to leave it, inshallah. Right. Then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, وَسُجُودُ السَّهْوِ, and sujood, now he's going to the hukum of sujood al-sahwi. Hukum sujood al-sahwi. It would have been good for him to bring sujood al-sahwi at the beginning. Like, why does he mention it now? Because he was already giving you scenarios and examples. So now you're not in no man's land. You're sure, you know what he's talking about now. Because when he says وَسُجُودُ السَّهْوِ and sujood al-sahwi, لِمَا يَبْطُلُ عَمْدُهُ وَاجِبٌ. وَسُجُودُ السَّهْوِ and sujood al-sahwi, لِمَا يَبْطُلُ, in that which if you leave out intentionally, your salah is invalid. For wajibun, then it is wajib. Then it is wajib. Like, the wording is not easy, sah. With sujood al-sahwi and sujood al-sahwi, pay attention now. Put the words to one side. What he's what he's saying to you is, he wants to give you the hukum of sujood al-sahwi, sah? Like, in the beginning we studied the qa'idah, that what? Sujood al-sahwi is only legislated for when you actually forget. Like, if you do something intentionally, then your what? Salah is invalid. Like, What if you leave out a rukun intentionally? Is your salah valid or invalid? Invalid. What if you leave out a wajib intentionally? Invalid. What if you leave out a sunnah intentionally? Valid. Therefore, the Shaykh is saying, rahimahullah, in the circumstance that if you were to leave something out, which is a pillar, intentionally, your salah would be invalid, sah? But if you leave it out accidentally, then sujood al-sahwi is wajib. In the event that if you were to leave something out that is wajib intentionally on purpose, your salah would be what? Invalid. Therefore, if you leave it out accidentally, it is wajib for you to do sujood al-sahwi. In other words, when do you have to do sujood al-sahwi? If you leave out a pillar or a wajib. If you leave out a pillar or a wajib. So in other words, you can reword that. A يجب سجود السهو إذا نسي ركنا أو واجبا. Right. So he says, when is it wajib for you to do? And use those words that I just said now. A, in other words, yajibu, it is wajib. Sujood al-sahwi is wajib. إذا نسي, if he forgets, ruknan or wajiban. Is that understood? Sah. Right. When is sujood al-sahwi wajib? If you forget a pillar or a wajib. The only difference is, with the pillar, you need to perform it again. With the wajib, mashi hal, you can just go on. If you can't go back to it, you just carry on. But then what do you do? Sujood al-sahwi. طيب. Then the Shaykh says, رحمه الله, وتبطل بترك سجود أفضليته قبل السلام فقط. طيب. He says now, وتبطل, and your salah is invalid. بترك سجودي, يعني بترك, on top of بترك put متعمدا, intentionally. Right. He says, so intentionally, it's obviously, it's understood from the author's words, like you have to write down. وَتَبْطُلُ, and the salah is invalid. بِتَرْكِ سُجُودِ, that if you leave out a sujood, obviously intentionally, أَفْضَلِيَتُهُ, where it is better to perform it, قَبْلَ السَّلَامِ فَقَط. قَبْلَ السَّلَامِ فَقَط. So if you have, now the Shaykh rahimahullah is taking us to another mas'ala, and he doesn't elaborate on it. Okay? In sujood al-sahwi, the question can arise, when do you do sujood al-sahwi? Do you do it before at-taslim, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi, or do you do it after? The Shaykh saying, rahimahullah, if you're meant to do sujood al-sahwi qabla salam, if you're meant to do sujood al-sahwi before you say assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, but you leave it out intentionally, then your salah is invalid. Why is this now? Because there's a naqs in there. Because now there is a what? A deficiency. You know the book that you've got? Let me see the kitab. Because there's a deficiency in there. Because the salah is what? What? Deficient. Because your salah will only be completed by performing that sujood al-sahwi. Like, after this, it doesn't do it. He doesn't explain it. This book is good for ta'lilat, like he doesn't have it here. Like in the ta'lil, the ta'lil is that he hasn't what? He left it out intentionally. It is as if your salah is incomplete and you intentionally left it out incomplete. Is that understood? Like in the reality is no one leaves out sujood sahwi intentionally anyway. defeats the purpose of sujood al-sahwi. طيب. What if a person leaves out a sunnah intentionally? Does he perform sujood al-sahwi? No. Why?
There's a reason why.
Because the whole reason of sujood al-sahwi is not there. Then the Shaykh says, رحمه وَإِن نَسِيَهُ, لكن if he forgets, وَسَلَّمَ, and he says, السلام عليكم ورحمة الله, السلام عليكم ورحمة الله, سجد إن قرب زمنه. طيب. وَإِن نَسِيَهُ, نسي ماذا? Sujood al-sahwi. Because in the last one he said your salah is invalid if you intentionally leave out sujood al-sahwi that you were meant to perform. Right? If you intentionally leave it out. Here he's saying to you, وَإِن نَسِيَهُ, like if he forgets to perform sujood al-sahwi, وَسَلَّمَ, and he says, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. He has forgotten. صح? What is the hal? What is the solution? The hukum, the solution, sajada, he performs sujood al-sahwi, إِذَا قَرُبَ زَمَنُهُ, if it is in close sequence.
وقل رب زدني